Hey guys, welcome back to Christy's Book Corner. I'm your host, Christy Mason, and we're going to continue with Chapter 10 of Finding Jacob Wetterling by Robert M. Dudley. One jailer cited Henrik's unusual behavior during the times he was in and out of Stearns County Jail for prior offenses. Heinrich was noted as a loner and acted very strange when other prisoners or jail officers attempt to interact with him. Wetterling investigators revealed very early on that they had made an unspecified connection between Jacob's abduction and Jared's abduction and assault in January 1989. The sure link between the cases that investigators often refer to vaguely without mentioning specifics was that in both cases the abductor had grabbed the boy's penis over their clothing. That had also been a common element of most of the Painesville cases. Between 1986 and 1988, there were many differences between Jacob's and Jared's abduction. The most paramount of those differences, of course, was that Jacob was never seen or heard from again. The other key variation between the incidences were that the man in Jacob's case wore a nylon mask, used a gun, and left witnesses behind. Aaron Larson and Trevor Wetterling. They were able to give a basic description of Jacob's abductor. He was said to be about 5'9" to 5'10" tall, weighing approximately 180 pounds, and spoke in a low, rough voice, as though he had a cold or was a smoker. He was wearing dark pants, a dark coat, and dark shoes. Danny James Heinrich started a new job working at North Star Mailing in St. Cloud on November 12, 1989. It had been exactly 3 weeks since Jacob Wetterling's abduction, and 5 weeks since Heinrich's last day of work at Finger Hut. Coincidentally, an arsonist struck another Lake Cornice area home that same day, November 12, 1989. It was the home of Wayne and Arlene Jude that burned down that day. The family had been away from home for the weekend. The fire was investigated as an arson, and it was determined that the fire started in the basement. The home showed evidence of being burglarized prior to being set on fire. In an unusual twist, the Jude home was located right next door to the Larson home, which had burned on October 12, 1989, exactly 1 month earlier. Two FBI agents interviewed Danny Heinrich on December 6, 1989. Heinrich admitted to investigators that he had been arrested a couple of times for burglary and had 2 DWI convictions. He was not able to provide an alibi for either January 13, 1989 or October 22, 1989. But he did suggest that the investigators he was probably doing laundry or visiting a friend. Investigators learned that Heinrich had moved out of his mother's apartment in Painesville and had been living in his father's home on Lake Cornice since November 30, 1989. He said that he had been driving a 1975 gray gold-colored Ford Granda since losing his Mercury Topaz in March 1989, and when he bought his then current car, blue 2-door 1982 Ford EXP, he sold the Granda to his mother. Heinrich told the investigators he had no knowledge of the abduction of Jared or Jacob Wetterling. He also denied ever wearing his military fatigues or army boots when he wasn't on guard duty. He said the guard frowned upon wearing the gear while off duty. Painesville Police Chief Robert Skimmelsey, can't say that fucking name, told Wetterling Task Force investigators on January 8, 1990, that the city of Painesville had experienced a period of molestation incidences in the late 1980s, and he believed Danny Heinrich should be considered a suspect in those cases. He told that Wetterling investigators that there had been several incidences of an adult male fitting Heinrich's description, groping a chasing juvenile boys. Painesville police had never made an arrest in those cases, but Heinrich appeared to have been a prime suspect. The FBI interviewed Heinrich again on January 12, 1990. He was wearing a pair of tennis shoes during the interview and admitted to investigators that it was the only pair of tennis shoes he owned and that he had purchased them at Sears about a year before. He gave his shoes to the investigators so they would perform tests on them. 3 days later, on January 5, 1990, Heinrich surrendered the rear tires on his blue 1982 Ford EXP. He told the investigators he had purchased the Ford EXP in September 1989, a month before the abduction. On January 15, 1989, Detectives Pierce obtained documents that indicated Heinrich had purchased the 1987 Mercury Topaz on March 10, 1988. The car had been repossessed on March 15, 1989. Detective Pierce was able to track down and contact the people who had bought the 1987 Mercury. The new owners of the car voluntarily dropped it to the Stearns County Sheriff's Office on January 16, 1990. Pierce brought Jared into the sheriff's office to view the vehicle. Jared sat inside the Topaz for a few minutes and agreed that the car felt like the car he had been kidnapped in, and he said he wouldn't change a thing about the car's interior. When asked to rate the Topaz on a scale of 1 to 10, with a 10 being the most similar to the car he was taken in, he rated it as an 8 or a 9. Detective Pierce collected back seat and carpet fibers sampling from the Mercury Topaz formerly owned by Heinrich on January 18, 1990. The samples were retained for testing against fibers from the clothing Jared wore during January 13, 1989 assault. On January 24, 1990, investigators accused a search warrant on the home owned by Howard Heinrich, located at 16021 County Road 124 east of Painesville. Danny's younger brother Tommy had told investigators that Danny had been living in the basement of his father's house since November 30, 1989. Officials sized up a number of items from Heinrich's home, including a black portable police scanner, carrying case, lists of police scanner frequencies, and used manual part of black lace-up boots. 2 brown caps, a Radio Shack scanner, frequency book, and a paint stub from Finger Hunt, dated October 8, 1989. They also confiscated a brown vest, a Regency programmable handheld scanner, and a 6-channel Regency scanner. Danny Heinrich was interviewed during the January 24th search. He was again unable to provide an alibi for the night of October 22nd, 1989, telling investigators that he was probably at his mother's apartment on Washburn Avenue in Painesville. He told them that he would typically spend his Sundays driving around town, doing laundry, or watching a TV movie. He denied being in St. Joseph that night or any time that week. It was noted that Heinrich's bottom row of teeth had black spots in the front due to many years of chewing tobacco. Ugh, that's disgusting. There's a 3 of the photos appeared to be of school-aged children and were marked with names. Where Heinrich claimed that the photos were of youths from the Twin Cities and that he had met them while he was a patient at Wilmar Regional Treatment Center. 2 of the other photos were of young males in various states of undress, and the last photo was of 3 full-clothed children. Officers intend to seize the photos, but Heinrich objected, stating that they shouldn't be taking photos solely on the basis of they just don't look right. The photos were left at the home, but in subsequent interviews with investigators, Heinrich said that he burned the photos because they looked bad and were no kind of pictures to have anyway. And it is interesting to note that January 12, 1990, the day the search warrant was executed at Heinrich's home, was also the same day that Alan Hart was arrested and charged with several counts of sexually assaulting juvenile boys. FBI agent returned to Heinrich's home the next day, January 25, 1990. This time, Danny's father, Howard, was also present. Danny agreed to come to the SCSO the next day to pick up the rear tires that had been removed from his 1982 Ford EXP 10 days earlier. Heinrich arrived at the sheriff's office on January 26, 1990, and agreed to participate with 5 other white males in the physical lineup for Jared to view. When Jared reviewed the lineup, more than a year had passed since he had been kidnapped and assaulted, and he was unable to positively identify any of the men as being the man who had assaulted him. He did identify Heinrich and one other person as being similar to his kidnapper, but he rated Danny as just as a 4 on a scale of 1 to 10, and the only other man was rated a 7. Photographs of Heinrich demonstrated that his physical appearance fluctuated significantly even over relatively brief periods of time. It is unknown how significantly Heinrich's appearance changed in the year that had passed between the date of Jared's assault and his viewing of the lineup. On January 26, 1990, the FBI laboratory called Wetterling investigators and told them that the tires from Heinrich's 1987 Mercury Topaz was consistent with tire impressions that were left at the scene of Jacob Wetterling's abduction. The consistency was specific to the tread design and size of Heinrich's Sears Superguard tires. However, the tires could not be considered a perfect match between because there were no disguising characteristics or defects in either the tires or the tread marks in the sandy gravel driveway to provide enough evidence to call them a match. Then January 30th, 1990, issued of the Painesville Press carried a front-page article about the arrest of Alan Hart. The article again referenced the ongoing investigation of the assaults of the young boys in Painesville. The issue marked the 5th time that the Painesville Press had published an article about the assaults or attempting kidnappings of young boys in town. Soon after searching the Heinrich home, investigators began making a connection between Heinrich and the fires that had been set in the neighborhood after Jacob's abduction. FBI Special Agent Eric Odegaard involved James Worm on February 5, 1990. The name had appeared on at least one photograph that was found in Danny Heinrich's possession during the January 24, 1990 search. Worm told the investigators that 2 of his sons would, would often visit the home of Wayne and Arlene Jude, whose home had burned down November 12, 1989. Arlene Jude was James Warren's sister. Warren recalled that Tommy Heinrich would sometimes play football with his sons while visiting the Jude home. Danny Heinrich would be there also, but would only watch the boys playing. According to Warren, he also noted that the Jude home had been burglarized in about 1984 or 1985, and again on the day of the house fire. Warren showed Agent Odegaard some photographs of his son from 1980. It was then that Odegaard realized that the boys in the photos resembled the boys that were seen in the photographs that were in Danny Heinrich's possession. The information about the photographs led investigators to more carefully consider the arson fire at the Jude home and a possible tie to Jacob Wetterling's kidnapping. However, the relevance of the arson fires at the Jude and Larson homes were likely of more value from a behavioral analysis standpoint than they would be in terms of evidence in Jacob's case. If Heinrich had burned Jacob's body in the Jude home, as some suspect, evidence of a body would probably have been found during the subsequent arson investigation. FBI investigators arrested Danny Heinrich for probable case for the kidnapping assault of Jared on February 9, 1990, more than a year after the January 1989 incident. The consistency between the fibers from in Heinrich's car and on the snow pants that Jared wore that night of his assault was the bias for the arrest. As is described in Al Garber's book, Striving to be the Best, the interview room was staged with furniture, special lights, and a flag. Heinrich told the investigators that he was not guilty of Jared's assault and that he was being framed. Heinrich demanded an attorney and refused to speak to investigators any further. He was subsequently released without being charged. Of significant interest with regard to Heinrich's 1990 arrest was the apparent dissent between investigating agencies. The FBI moved forward with arrest without consulting with the BCA and against advice from the Stearns County Attorney's Office. Garber notes that the Stearns County District Attorney was furious that Heinrich had been arrested permanently. One day short of the anniversary of Danny Heinrich's arrest, on February 8, 1991, investigators returned to Heinrich all of the property that had been seized during the January 24, 1990 execution of the search warrant on his father's home. On April 2, 1991, Painesville police officer Stephen Limick requested assistance from the CSO. City residents had complained about a strange man driving a tan-colored vehicle that had been witnessed following boys on their newspaper delivery routes. A Stearns County deputy was dispatched to perform surveillance, and he observed a tan-colored 1984 Buick driven by Danny Heinrich. Heinrich appeared to be following a paperboy through the downtown area. The deputy noted that although it appeared that Heinrich was stalking newspaper boys, he did not have probable case to pull him over. The deputy wrote a report, but no further action was taken. According to court records, there was no further contact between Wetterling's investigators and Danny Heinrich for more than 20 years. It was as if he had disappeared from the investigative radar with regard to the Jacob Wetterling kidnapping. The only reference to Heinrich that would come in the years to come came from media sources, and those resources never mentioned Heinrich's by name. Their first reference to Heinrich came, oh my god, 1995, when WCCO reported a search warrant that had been executed on several Wetterling suspects during the early days of the investigation. Stearns County officials thought the warrants were sealed, but those seals had unknowingly expired. One of those warrants was apparently for Danny Heinrich, a man who had not been cleared in the case. The second media reference to Heinrich came a year later, when WCCO interviewed him. Heinrich was not identified, nor is his face seen in the video, but his voice can be heard denying he had anything to do with Jacob's abduction. He recounted the investigators had confirmed him, saying, "We know it's you, it's you, it's you." Heinrich said that he countered with, "No, it's not, it's not, it's not, it's not." Heinrich told WCCO that he had failed a lie detector test when questioned about Jacob Wetterling's abduction in 1990, and that he refused to take a second test. He told the reporters that he didn't keep track of where he was that night of Jacob's abduction, but that he was probably at home. Heinrich said that he was aware that he was under surveillance for months following Jacob's abduction. "It was pure hell," Heinrich said, as he described the pressure on him while under surveillance. "There is nothing I can tell them. I have no information whatsoever. That's the truth." The drinking incidents from the mid-1980s, as described by Chris Larson, and the possible link between Heinrich and Larson, home arson in October 1989, were not the last times that Heinrich and Larson would cross each other's paths. Larson's parents bought Heinrich's dark blue 1989 Ford EXP from his driveway for $1,000 a few years later. The Larsons scrapped the car in 2007 after it was involved in an accident. Little did they know that that car would draw some unwanted attention decades later, as Wetterling investigators would zero in once again on Danny Heinrich. On July 18, 2012, a Minnesota BCA reporter revealed that a DNA profile had been obtained from Jared's snow pants, sweater, and t-shirt. The DNA results showed the presence of a DNA mixture of two or more individuals. Jared could not be excluded as a contributor to the DNA mixture, and that would naturally be expected since Jared had worn the clothing that was tested. What investigators were mostly interested in was the presence of the prominator male. Percent of the general population could be excluded from the profile, meaning whoever had left the DNA was Jared's abductor. If investigators could match that profile to a suspect, they would have their man. What is particularly interesting about the July 2012 DNA report is that it is indicative that investigators had been actively looking at Jared's case in connection to Jacob's, long before Robert Dudley or Joe Baker had begun researching Jared's case or the Painesville incidences in 2013. In fact, there are references in court documents that appear to suggest that investigators had been making an effort to obtain the DNA profile for some time. Nearly 2 years later, on March 5, 2014, investigators received laboratory DNA profile results for samples taken from the blue hat that had been left behind after the May 17, 1987 Painesville incident. The result indicated a mixture of DNA from 3 or more individuals on the baseball cap. Hair samples had been taken from Danny Heinrichs during execution of a January a January 1990 search warrant. On May 12, 2015, the FBI submitted those hair samples to the BCA for evaluation. The BCA laboratory determined the samples were suitable for nuclear DNA testing. The results came back on January 10, 2015. The DNA result from Heinrich's hair samples were a match to the previous unknown male DNA profile had been found on Jared's clothing. For the first time, investigators had indisputable proof of the identity of Jared's abductor, as DNA results included all persons other than Danny Heinrich. In July of 2015, Heinrich's DNA was also tested against the hat from the May 17, 1987 Painesville assault. Heinrich could not be executed as a contributor to one of the 3 DNA profiles that were recovered from the hat. While not conclusive, the results indicating that 80.5% of the general population could be executed as being contributors to the DNA. Investigators used the DNA results as the basis to obtain a search warrant for Danny Heinrich's home in Annandale. The sure link between Jacob Wetterling's abduction and Jared's kidnapping and assault appeared to be more certain than ever once investigators had the combination of Heinrich's tires and shoe prints in the Razor driveway and evidence that Heinrich's DNA was present on Jared's clothing. With a search warrant in hand, investigators raided the home of Danny Heinrich at 5th Myrtle Avenue South in the west of Annandale, Minnesota. On July 28, 2015, the application for a search warrant filed with the 10th District Court of Minnesota gives significant insights as to what investigators would hope to find when they searched Heinrich's home. The most substantial items related to the Jacob Wetterling kidnapping listed in the warrant application included Jacob himself, alive or dead, and including any bones, dental work, hairs, or biological samples. Also listed were the items of clothing that Jacob was known to be wearing at the time of his abduction. The application also lists any indication of residence or the whereabouts of Heinrich for January 13, 1989 and or October 22, 1989. They were looking for a human hair, a wallet, knives, or silver gun, handheld police scanners, clothing, a military style watch, computer files, electronic devices, email files, and deleted computer files. In short, investigators were looking for anything of the Painesville assault cases. They were also looking for any evidence of possession of distribution of child pornography. Stearns County Attorney Janelle Kendall left no doubt as to what investigators were seeking when they entered Danny Heinrich's home on July 28, 2015. We searched his house because we were looking for Jacob Wetterling, Kendall declared. The search warrant that we used to search the house is fully public document, and that's everything there is to know. That's it. The good news and the bad news is that's all of it. Among all things, investigators found 19 3-ring binders filled with pages of child pornography during the search. Although they were looking primarily for items related to Jacob Wetterling's abduction, they were also seeking anything they could find related to Jared's assault and the Painesville cluster of assaults from the late 1980s. Due to the statutes of elimination laws, those cases could never be tried even if clear evidence linking Heinrich to those crimes was found. However, investigators knew that prosecutors would be able to use evidence in those crimes as consideration during any future sentencing hearings related to other charges. A 3-page receipt and inventory of items removed from Heinrich's home included a total of 55 itemized pieces of evidence. Some of them more interesting items including silver keys to unidentified logs, a state of Minnesota's driver's license of Heinrich's that had been expired in 1991, 16 photographs of children and a plastic tote box of film negatives, a one cell phone, 2 handheld scanners, dozens and dozens of VHS tapes and DVDs, 2 umbilical super telephone lenses, military camouflage pants and shirt, and 4 clear totes of boys' athletic clothing. One item of note that had been on the inventory list originally was a pair of blue sweatpants, size 32-34. The item was crossed off the inventory list and included a notion that the sweatpants were sent to the BCA on July 28, 2015. Perhaps the pants and other items were sent in for laboratory testing. Several other items were found during the search, but were not listed on the inventory of materials confiscated from Heinrich's home. There were knives, Nazi memorabilia, a pair of silver handcuffs, and duct tape. Investigators were not able to find the silver handgun they were looking for, but one of Heinrich's homemade videos appeared to have been a video tour of his home. In the video, Heinrich is shown opening the door to a safe, and inside the safe was a gun. The video focused on the gun, which appeared to be loaded. Videotapes found in Heinrich's home indicated that Heinrich had record hours of video footage of young boys delivering newspapers, riding bicycles, playing on public playgrounds, and participating in sports activities. In some of the videos, Heinrich could be seen putting money on the ground with the video camera positioned in such a way that when a boy bent over to pick up the money, the camera would be pointing at the boy's buttocks. Investigators noted that Heinrich sexualized the subjects and homemade videos in several ways. For example, the videos would focus and zoom in on the buttocks and genital areas of the boys that were videotaped. That is so bad. Other photos in Heinrich's possession were converted into still images and had sexual charged phrases superimposed on them. Most of the images were of boys, but Heinrich's collection did include some photos of juvenile girls as well. Investigators also found recordings of new reports about Jacob Wetterling's abduction, as well as reports about other missing children. FBI behavioral analysis suggests that violent criminals such as child molesters often keep close tabs on the investigation and tend to keep newspaper clippings and videos as previous mementos. The 3 ring binders that were seized from Heinrich's home contained multiple images of pre-consented children that appeared to fit the definition of child pornography. Some of the photos were printed from online websites and included the source website's URL information. Some of the images seemed to be labeled with phrases that indicated an arrest in blonde-haired boys. A review of what Agent Ball describes as only a small portion of the binders was compared against a national database of known victims of sexual abuse, and it was determined that some of the pictures were identified as known victims of child exploitation. Investigators found images in Heinrich's collection that indicated that he engaged in practice of morphing, whereby images of children are converted into child pornography through the use of computer technology. An example of morphed morphed images that were found, including copies that had of a child from a non-sexual image and supposing that images onto another image that portrays child pornography. From information contained within the criminal complaint, it was alleged that Heinrich morphed several images of boys from Painesville High School yearbooks from 1970s. The complaint specifies that 1970 images of juvenile boys identified only as victim K were morphed. Only several pornographic images. An examination of Heinrich's computer revealed that Heinrich had been online searches for victim K. Investigators were able to identify at least 3 other juvenile boys whose photos have been morphed into child pornography. Images found in Heinrich's possession. Further examination of Heinrich's computer usage found that he had used internet search terms such as 1976 7th grade class photos, kids' Christmas photos 1978, 2013 7th grade Wetterling photos, boys in the tough skin jeans photos, Painesville, Minnesota school photos, and more. That concludes part 2 and chapter 10. Stay tuned for part 3, which is going to be short. So thank you so much for watching, and if you like my videos, smash the like button. You can leave a comment on what you liked about the books or the chapters themselves. Talk about what you don't like, but make sure it's not rude. And if you want more videos, click that link, click the subscribe button, and turn on the notifications bell. Remember to dare to dream, guys. Bye.